3 million pages of evidence, thousands of unsealed flight logs, millions of data points, names, themes, and timelines connected. You are listening to the Epstein Files, the world's first AI-native investigation into the case that traditional journalism simply could not handle.
Welcome to the Epstein Files.
I'm joining you as the lead analyst on this project.
Today is Monday, February 2nd, 2026. And if you've been following the news over the last month, you know why we're here. But we need to be very clear from the outset. This isn't a retelling of the stories you've already heard.
No, this is not a true crime podcast. It's not for entertainment.
This is a forensic audit.
Precisely. And the reason we're doing this now is because of a piece of legislation, the Epstein Files Transparency Act, or EFTA.
Right.
As of January 2026, just last month, the DOJ was compelled to release the final tranche of sealed documents. Everything.
And we need to be clear about the scale of this. We're not talking about a box of papers.
No, not at all. We are talking about a data dump of over 3.5 million pages.
It's an incredible number.
It is. This includes the consolidated FBI files that dropped right after Christmas 2025. It includes the 20,000 estate documents, and it pulls in all those earlier releases, too.
It's an overwhelming amount of raw data. Flight logs, financial records, police affidavits, things that have been sealed for decades.
And our mission here is to act as a filter. We're using AI-assisted tools to process the sheer volume, but it's human analysis, forensic accounting that's making sense of it.
And that's a key distinction. We are not here to speculate.
Absolutely not. We are reviewers of the record. If we have a document, we'll tell you, we'll cite it. But where there are gaps in that record, and believe me, there are significant gaps,
We're going to point them out.
we will acknowledge the silence. We're not going to fill it in with theories. We're simply going to measure the void.
So for this first deep dive, episode 1, the focus is very specific. Before we can even begin to talk about the network or the crimes,
We have to answer the one question that's been at the center of this for 20 years.
who is Jeffrey Epstein?
Not the monster, not the caricature.
No, we have to strip that away for a moment.
Yeah.
We know the ending. We know the headlines.
Mm-hmm.
To understand how it all happened, we have to look at the man on paper, the man before the infamy.
And that's where it gets interesting. Because when you pull the vital records from the FBI's consolidated files, the person you find is an anomaly.
So let's start there. Let's go right back to the beginning. Section 1, Origins.
Jeffrey Edward Epstein, born January 20, 1953, Brooklyn, New York.
And the setting here is so important. It establishes the baseline from which we measure everything else.
It does. He grew up in Coney Island. The family lived in Seagate, a small gated community there. But this was a standard working-class Jewish family, mid-century America.
His father was a groundskeeper.
Seymour Epstein. He worked for the New York City Parks Department. His mother, Paula, was a homemaker, later a school aide.
I'm looking at some of the background check summaries here from the FBI files. The tax returns, there's nothing. No hint of family money, no powerful connections.
Zero. The records show a modest, stable life. They weren't poor, not by any means, but they were a world away from the Manhattan elite, a civil service family.
And this is so crucial, because the man we see later in life is moving in circles that are almost impossible to enter without generations of wealth or status behind you.
And he had neither.
What about his education? The myth is that he was some kind of prodigy, a math genius. Do the school records actually back that up?
The records from Lafayette High School are in the files, and they paint a picture of someone who was, yes, very intelligent, but also indifferent.
How so?
Well, he skipped a grade, so the aptitude was clearly there. He was gifted in math, no question, taught himself piano. But the genius label, it implies a certain discipline, a rigor.
Which he didn't have.
He didn't have it. He bounced around a short time at Cooper Union, then he dropped out. He tried the Curran Institute at NYU for math, and again, dropped out. He seemed constitutionally incapable of finishing anything institutional.
So by 1974, he's what, 21 years old?
21.
No college degree, no family money, no professional qualifications. On paper, he is essentially a drifter.
And this is where we have to pause and make our first forensic note of this audit. Okay.
In any kind of profiling, when you see a subject make a leap from a working class background in Coney Island to, say, the Upper East Side of Manhattan, without a clear bridge event, that's an immediate red flag.
Define bridge event for us.
A bridge event is the documented mechanism for that jump in status. It's something you can see on paper.
Like inventing something, a patent.
Exactly.
Huh.
A tech startup. Or a lottery win. Marrying into an old money family. Maybe a 15-year climb up a corporate ladder with documented promotions. Or a massive successful crime. Something that explains the sudden capital.
And with Epstein.
The bridge is missing. He didn't invent anything. He didn't marry into money. He didn't have a degree. And yet the timeline just shows him appearing. It's like he teleports from being a college dropout to a position of real influence.
Which takes us right into the next section, the credential laundering, the period from 1969 to 1976. This is the Dalton School era.
This is the first verifiable instance of what I would call infiltration. It's the moment the anomaly truly begins. We should probably explain what the Dalton School is. For anyone not from New York, this isn't just any private school.
No. Dalton is an institution of the Manhattan aristocracy. It's where the children of billionaires, CEOs, cultural icons. That's where they go. It is a fortress of money and power.
And into this fortress walks Jeffrey Epstein, son of a groundskeeper, college dropout.
And they hire him to teach physics and calculus.
I mean, it's just...
Yeah.
It's absurd. You'd need a master's degree, probably a PhD, from a top university to even get an interview there.
And a teaching certificate. He had none of it.
So how? How does it happen? The files identify the headmaster, Donald Barr, as the one who hired him.
Donald Barr, he's a fascinating figure, a very serious intellectual, a conservative academic, and coincidentally, the father of the future Attorney General, Bill Barr.
Okay.
Barr was known for being an iconoclast. He famously didn't care about credentials on paper if he thought he spotted brilliance in someone.
But surely there's a process. Human resources, background checks.
That's the thing. When the FBI looked back, decades later, they noted in the files that there was no standard application for Epstein, no transcripts requested. It seems to have been a handshake deal.
So the question remains, how does a completely unqualified person get access to the children of the most powerful people in New York City?
That is the central question of this period. The documents don't have a clear answer. The prevailing theory is that he must have charmed someone who had Barr's ear, but there's no paper trail for that referral.
What do we have?
We have interviews. Decades later, the FBI spoke to former students and colleagues.
And what did they say?
The descriptions are consistent, charismatic, unconventional. One former student remembered him teaching math while wearing a fur coat and gold chains.
In a classroom.
In a classroom. Now, it was the 70s, but even for the 70s, that's flamboyant. The consensus is he ignored the curriculum but captivated the students. He was a performer.
And this seems like the foundational moment. This is where he learns how the persona works.
It's his laboratory. He learns a critical lesson at Dalton. Performance trumps reality. If you act like you belong, if you project an aura of intelligence, the gatekeepers won't actually check the paperwork.
Not even the wealthy parents paying massive tuition.
Especially them. He learned that the elite are uniquely susceptible to the performance of genius.
But it doesn't last. His time at Dalton ends pretty abruptly in 1976.
It does. The record shows he left mid-year. But the reason for his departure is a blank. The specific page in his personnel file is either missing or was heavily redacted in the DOJ release.
And as a forensic auditor, what does a blank page like that tell you?
A blank page in a personnel file is louder than a detailed one. It almost always signifies a negotiated exit.
Meaning?
Look, if a teacher is fired for being bad at their job, you document it to protect the school legally. If they resign to take another job, there's a resignation letter. A void like this usually means something happened and the deal was, you leave quietly right now and we will make this disappear.
And there were rumors at the time about improper conduct with students.
The files are full of hearsay about it, yes. Retrospective accounts of him being too familiar with female students showing up at parties, but nothing that led to charges back then. Still, the timing, the sudden departure, the missing file, it's all consistent with a quiet dismissal to avoid a scandal.
And yet, here's the pattern again. He fails upward. He gets pushed out of Dalton under a cloud.
And lands on Wall Street.
Section 3, the Bear Stearns rise.
It's an incredible pivot. He goes from teaching teenagers to working at Bear Stearns, which at the time was one of the most aggressive, cutthroat investment banks in the world.
And again, let's check the resume. No degree in finance, no MBA.
No degree at all. But he had an in. The file suggests he was tutoring the son of a senior partner at Bear Stearns. Some say it was the CEO, Ace Greenberg himself. But he got his foot in the door.
It's worth talking about the culture of Bear Stearns in the late 70s. This wasn't some stuffy old money firm.
No, it was a Shark Tank. Ace Greenberg was famous for his hiring philosophy. He wanted PhDs, poor, smart, and a deep desire to get rich.
He didn't care about your Ivy League degree?
He cared if you could make money, period. Epstein was the perfect fit for that mold. He was hungry, he was smart, and he clearly had very few ethical guardrails.
And his rise there is just meteoric.
It's statistically improbable. He starts at the bottom, a junior assistant, and in 4 years he's made a limited partner. That's a position that should take a decade or more of grinding to reach.
So was this it? Was this the proof of his genius? Was he some kind of brilliant trader?
We looked at the trading records we could find in the archives, and the answer is no. He wasn't a quant. He wasn't some math wizard creating new algorithms. His name isn't on any major innovative trades.
So what was he doing? How do you become a partner if you're not actually trading or managing a portfolio?
He was a networker, a fixer. His value to Bear Stearns wasn't his ability to analyze the market. It was his ability to bring in money.
From who?
From the ultra-wealthy. He could speak their language. He could offer them things the firm officially couldn't. Discretion, complicated tax avoidance strategies. He became the guy who handled the delicate financial affairs of very rich people.
He was the go-between.
Exactly. He bridged the gap between the rough-and-tumble traders on the floor and the polite society of the Upper East Side. He was bringing in the whales.
But just like Dalton, it ends. 1981, he's out.
He's forced out, yes.
And the official reason given.
Regulatory infractions. The files point to a specific rule violation about a personal loan he took from the firm for an investment, a compliance issue.
Which sounds a little thin.
It sounds very thin. Bear Stearns in 1981 was the Wild West. Bending the rules was part of the business model. To fire a rainmaker, a limited partner, for a minor compliance breach seems highly unlikely.
So what does that suggest?
It suggests the official reason wasn't the real reason. Either he had become a liability in some other undocumented way, or, and this is crucial, he had gotten what he needed from them and was ready to go out on his own.
This is the moment. 1981, he becomes a free agent.
And this is the most dangerous point in his timeline, because he leaves with the single most valuable asset from Bear Stearns, the contacts, the first version of his little black book.
But he loses the one thing that was keeping him in check.
The oversight. There's no compliance department watching him now, no boss, no accountability. He is completely off the leash.
And he walks right into what our outline calls the black hole, the years between 1981 and 1987.
When we analyze those 3.5 million pages, the data density for this 6-year period just plummets. The paper trail goes cold, very few tax returns, no official business filings. It's a void.
We do know one name that comes up during this time. Stephen Hoffenberg.
Tower Financial.
For listeners who don't remember, you need to explain what Tower Financial was.
In short, it was one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in American history before Bernie Madoff. Hoffenberg was the guy running it. He took a debt collection agency and turned it into a massive fraud, bilking investors out of hundreds of millions of dollars.
And Epstein's role? He was a consultant.
A very highly paid consultant. The records show he was being paid $25,000 a month in 1982 money.
That's an enormous sum back then.
It's astronomical. He was brought in to, ostensibly, help save the company. But his real role seems to have been more about financial engineering.
But here's the key forensic observation from this period. Hoffenberg, the mastermind, ends up in prison for years.
For a very long time.
And Epstein?
He's gone. He exits before the whole thing collapses. This is the pattern, solidified. He operates right on the edge of major financial fraud, extracts his capital, and then distances himself just before law enforcement closes in.
He takes the money and the lessons, and someone else takes the fall.
Precisely. You could say Tower Financial was his PhD in fraud. He saw from the inside how a massive Ponzi scheme is built, how it's maintained, and most importantly, how to get out before it implodes.
So by 1987, the black hole period ends. He merges with capital, with a network, but with no legitimate business.
Which leads us to the biggest fabrication of all. Section 5, the wealth mystery.
This is when the myth is born. The myth of Jeffrey Epstein, the brilliant, secretive money manager for billionaires.
And the media just ran with it. Oh, completely. You can read the profiles from the 90s in Vanity Fair and New York Magazine. They all call him a financier, a modern Gatsby.
But now we had the estate documents. We have the will. We can finally run an audit on his client list. So if he was a billionaire money manager, where are the billionaires? Plural.
And the finding is stark. There is no list.
Explain that.
Any legitimate wealth manager, even one dealing with the super rich, has a portfolio of clients. You'd have maybe 10, 20, 30 major accounts. It's just basic risk management. You never tie your entire firm to one person.
And Epstein had how many?
One documented major client, Leslie Wexner.
The founder of the Limited, Victoria's Secret.
Yes. The files show Epstein eventually gained complete power of attorney over Wexner's entire fortune. His personal wealth, his family trusts, his real estate transactions. He embedded himself into every aspect of Wexner's financial life.
But this creates a math problem.
Let's do the math. Okay. So even if you're managing a multi-billion-dollar fortune for one person, a standard fee is, say, 2% a year, plus 20% of the profits. You're making a lot of money.
But it's not infinite money.
It's not infinite. And this is where we have to look at his expenses, his burn rate. We've seen the invoices from the estate documents. The cost just to operate his life was staggering.
We're talking about multiple private jets.
A Gulfstream and a custom Boeing 727, a private island in the Caribbean, the largest private mansion in Manhattan, a ranch in New Mexico, an apartment in Paris.
Staff alone.
The staff, the fuel for the jets, the pilots, the property taxes, the lawyers. We estimate his annual operating costs were in the tens of millions of dollars. The math simply does not work. The management fees from one client's portfolio cannot sustain that level of asset acquisition and cash outflow.
So if the money he's spending is far greater than the money coming in from his stated business,
then in forensic accounting, that's the moment you start searching for the real business. You look for off-book income, money laundering, blackmail proceeds, intelligence agency funding. Something has to fill that gap.
let's talk about the business infrastructure, or the lack of it. His office was in the Villard Houses, this historic mansion on Madison Avenue.
Right. And I want you to picture a real hedge fund. You'd see a trading floor, rows of computer terminals, analysts, the legal team, compliance officers.
What did they find at Epstein's office?
It was a stage set. There was no trading floor. There were no analysts. The staff, according to depositions, consisted almost entirely of young women who were hired as assistants or recruiters. They weren't executing trades.
It was a convincing front.
A very expensive and very convincing front. But it wasn't a financial services firm. It was a backdrop for a performance.
Which brings us to Section 6. How did he build this persona? If you're not actually running a business, how do you convince the entire world that you are for 30 years?
You do it through association. You launder your reputation by borrowing the credibility of others.
Let's start with the science philanthropist persona. This was a huge part of his public image.
It was a masterstroke. Epstein understood that in the world he wanted to inhabit, money is almost common. But being seen as a genius is rare and valuable. He couldn't claim a distinguished academic background.
So he bought one.
He bought the people who had them. We see it in the documents detailing his donations. Millions to Harvard, to MIT. He sponsored conferences on theoretical physics and evolutionary biology.
He wasn't just writing checks, though. He was putting himself in the room.
He was buying a seat at the table. He cultivated relationships with Nobel laureates, famous scientists like Marvin Minsky and Stephen Hawking. By being photographed with them, by hosting them on his island, he absorbed their intellectual credibility. It provided him with the perfect cover.
It's camouflage.
It's the best camouflage imaginable. Who's going to ask tough questions about your finances when you're busy discussing string theory with a world-renowned physicist? It reframes you from a shady money guy into a visionary patron of science.
And then there's the other tool, the little black book.
We have a digitized copy from the files. It seems to date from around 2004, 2005.
And it's more than just a list of phone numbers.
Oh, much more. In the world of intelligence or high-level networking, this is what you'd call an asset map. It's not just names. It's home numbers, cell numbers, office numbers, vacation home numbers. It's assistants, spouses, children.
The names in it are a cross-section of global power. Politicians like Tony Blair, royalty, movie stars like Alec Baldwin, titans of industry like David Koch.
And we have to be really clear here. Being in the book doesn't mean you're guilty of a crime.
Right.
But what it does show is the reach of his network. His entire persona was built on a kind of circular logic. Person A trusted Epstein because they saw that person B was in his circle. And person B trusted him because person A was at his dinner parties.
It's a Ponzi scheme of social proof.
A circular verification scheme is the technical term. He was the hub. He made himself the indispensable connector between these different worlds of power finance, politics, science, Hollywood.
And on top of all that, he actively cultivated an air of mystery. The intelligence connections.
He let the rumors fly. That he was working for the CIA, for Mossad, for some other foreign intelligence agency. He never confirmed it, but he never denied it either.
Is there anything in these DOJ files that proves any of that?
There is no document in this 3.5 million page release that shows a pay stub from an intelligence agency. We've looked. But what the files do show is how much he benefited from that rumor.
How?
It's a shield. If banks, regulators, or journalists think you might be a protected intelligence asset, they back off. They stop asking hard questions about the source of your money because they assume it's part of a covert operation. It's the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card.
But eventually, the shield cracked.
It shattered in Palm Beach.
Which brings us to our last section. The documented reality versus the carefully constructed myth. And the key text here is the 2006 probable cause affidavit from the Palm Beach Police Department.
This document is the Rosetta Stone for understanding the truth. It just demolishes the entire sophisticated financier persona he'd spent decades building.
Why is it so devastating?
Because the myth was about this high-minded intellectual jet-setting between scientific conferences and meetings with world leaders. The reality described in the affidavit is sordid. It's gritty, it's transactional and crude.
It describes the mansion not as a home, but as something else.
As a procurement center. It details a constant flow of underage girls being brought to the house for massages that were, in fact, sexual abuse. The world he built was not about high finance. It was about low-level, systematic predation.
The contrast is just absolute.
It is. The man from the New York Magazine profile cannot be the same person described in the police affidavit. One of them is a lie. And the police had receipts.
It was House of Cards.
Built on the abuse of children.
Let's circle back to the money one last time. We have his will, filed after his death in 2019. What was the final valuation of the estate?
Just over $577 million.
Which is a huge amount of money for anyone. But for someone who claimed to be a billionaire, a titan of finance, it's actually low.
It's low, and the composition of the assets is what's really telling.
What do you mean?
It was almost all illiquid assets. The houses, the island, the planes, the art. There was very little actual cash relative to the total value. He was asset-rich, but he appeared to be cash-constrained. And the corporate structure was designed for one thing: hiding.
The offshore trusts in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Exactly. Absurdly complex structures like the 1953 trust. You simply don't need that level of legal obfuscation if your business is just managing one person's money. You need it when you're hiding the source of your funds or protecting your assets from lawsuits you know are coming.
So we've come full circle. We've stripped away the myths. We've looked at the paper trail.
And we're left with a man who, on paper, should not have been able to exist.
A kid from a working-class family with no degree. A teacher with no teaching credentials, a Wall Street partner with no real track record, a money manager with only one client.
We've laid out all the red flags, all the gaps in the record, the estate documents, the FBI files. They all point to this massive, unsolved variable at the heart of the story.
We know who he pretended to be. We know what he owned. We certainly know about the crimes he was eventually arrested for.
But the core forensic accounting problem remains. The numbers don't add up. The money he spent does not equal the money he could have possibly earned from his legitimate, stated business.
So if that business, financial management for the ultra-wealthy, was a myth, a front, then what was the actual business?
This is the fundamental question we have to answer. Was he just a more successful Ponzi schemer? Was his real product blackmail? Was he, in fact, an intelligence asset? Or was the trafficking operation itself the primary source of revenue?
That's where we're going next.
We've audited the man. Now we need to audit the machine he built around himself.
Next time on the Epstein Files, we analyze the flight logs, we map the properties, and we trace the network of people who enabled him. We'll ask the question, was the trafficking the vice, or was it the business model?
We're going to look at who was on those planes, not for gossip, but to follow the money and the flow of power.
This was episode 1 of the Epstein Files.
An analysis based on the 2026 DOJ document release.
We'll see it in the files.
You have just heard an analysis of the official record. Every claim, name, and date mentioned in this episode is backed by primary source documents. You can view the original files for yourself at epsteinfiles.fm. If you value this data-first approach to journalism, please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening right now. It helps keep this investigation visible. We'll see you in the next file.